It doesn't always begin with a breakup. Sometimes, grief tiptoes in quietly. In the middle of a conversation. Or at the sound of a familiar ringtone. Or when someone asks, "Are you seeing your family this holiday?" And just like that, your chest tightens. Because the answer is complicated. And the story is heavy. They're still alive. You didn't bury them. There was no funeral. No flowers. No goodbyes. But something in you. Something quiet, something precious. Died in that relationship. This isn't the grief of death. This is the grief of being unseen, unheard, and unloved. For years. You might have walked away. You might have gone no contact. You might be building a life full of clarity and courage. But some days, that old ache sneaks back in. And it feels like failure. It feels like weakness. It feels like maybe you haven't healed after all. But what if I told you? This grief is not weakness? What if this grief is a kind of wisdom? A knowing that something real was lost. Something the world will never fully validate. Something that won't get closure. Because when grief has no ending, healing must learn to live beside it. So let's talk. Let's talk about that kind of grief. The kind that stays. The kind that returns. The kind that comes from surviving someone who never truly saw you. You're out. You've left. You've set boundaries. You've done the work. But why does it still hurt? That's the part no one tells you about grief in narcissistic relationships. It loops. It spirals. It comes back. Again and again and again. This isn't just sadness. It's unresolved grief. Because in most relationships, when things end, there's some form of closure. A conversation, a decision, a shared understanding, even if it's painful. But narcissistic abuse doesn't end like that. There's no moment of mutual truth. No final honesty. Often, there's no acknowledgement at all. Instead, you leave. Still blamed. Still doubting yourself. Still wondering if any of it was ever real. That's the loop. You're grieving not just a person, but the version of you that tried so hard to be enough for them. The years you stayed. The part of your soul that kept hoping. If I just love them better, maybe this time they'll see me. And when they don't. That's the grief. Not the loss of a person. But the loss of a dream. The loss of clarity. The loss of innocence. The loss of time. And because the world rarely recognizes this kind of grief, you start to think maybe you are the problem. But what if I told you? You're not broken? What if I told you, this loop has a name, and you're not the only one inside it? Comment loop if you've ever felt this, like you were trapped in a grief cycle no one else could see. Because next, we're going to talk about why this loop keeps returning. Even when you think you're done with it. It's not over. But neither are you. Stay with me. It's been months, maybe even years. You've moved. You've blocked. You've gone no contact. But suddenly, one photo, one memory, one sentence, and you're back there again. That's not weakness. That's neuroscience. Grief from narcissistic relationships is somatic. It doesn't just live in your mind. It lives in your nervous system. Your body. When you were in that relationship, your brain, especially the parts that deal with fear and survival, had to work overtime to decode danger. Was their silence punishment? Was their smile real this time? Would today be calm or chaos? This constant hypervigilance literally rewired your brain. It created neural shortcuts, so the next time something similar happened, your body would respond fast. Tight chest, dry mouth, mental fog, shut down. And that's what triggers are. Your brain isn't irrational. It's trying to protect you. Even if the danger is in the past. So when someone raises their voice, Or you smell their cologne on someone else. Or you hear a phrase they used to say. Your body reacts. Before your thoughts can catch up, your body remembers. And that's why grief comes back out of nowhere. It's not the moment. It's the memory inside the moment. Now here's the hard part. Even when you know this, when you've read the books, done the therapy, set the boundaries, grief can still knock the wind out of you. Because healing isn't amnesia. It's capacity. Capacity to notice. To name. To breathe. To stay. If you've ever been triggered by something so small it felt embarrassing, drop a broken heart in the comments. You're not alone, and you're not crazy. In the next part, we'll explore why other people don't understand this kind of grief. And why that makes it even harder to carry. Stay with me. You're walking through something real. You bring it up, and someone laughs. You say you're still hurting, and they say, but they're not dead. Just move on. And there it is, grief, dismissed. Welcome to one of the hardest parts of surviving a narcissistic relationship. The grief is real. But the world doesn't recognize it. With traditional grief, there are rituals. Funerals. Condolences. Space to cry. Time to heal. But with narcissistic abuse, there's none of that. No flowers. No cards. No room to collapse. Because the person who hurt you is still here. They're posting smiling photos. Living their life. To the world, they look fine. So your grief? It feels invisible. Invalidated. And that kind of silence cuts deeper than words. People ask, why can't you just forgive? Why does it still bother you? Why hold on to this pain? Because you're not grieving the absence of a person. You're grieving the absence of love. The absence of safety. The loss without closure. You're grieving being gaslit into thinking it was your fault. You're grieving years of walking on eggshells. Hoping to be seen. If you've ever had someone make you feel foolish for hurting. Just because the relationship didn't end in death. Drop a speech balloon in the comments with the word unseen. You're not overreacting. You're reacting to a wound the world refuses to name. And that's why this grief lingers. Because the world told you, again and again, your pain doesn't count. In the next part, we'll explore the many faces of grief in a narcissistic dynamic. And how sometimes, you don't even realize what you're grieving until it hits you, all at once. Stay with me. Because you deserve to be seen. It's not just one kind of grief. It's dozens. Layered. Complex. And many of them, we don't even realize we're carrying. Yes, the person hurt you. But that's not the only thing you're grieving. You're grieving who you were before the narcissistic relationship. Before you started second-guessing your every thought. Before your confidence became conditional. Before your boundaries got redefined as selfish. You're grieving the time. Years you'll never get back. Birthdays spent crying. Vacations ruined by arguments. Sleepless nights spent replaying conversations. Wondering what you could have said differently. You're grieving the version of them you thought was real. The one who loved you at first. The one who said all the right things. That person was never fully real. But you loved them like they were. And then, there's the grief of what you lost along the way. Friends who didn't understand. Family who sided with them. Even you. The self that once dreamed bigger, laughed louder, lived freer. One survivor on Reddit said, I'm not grieving him. I'm grieving me. The girl who thought love was enough to save someone. Comment layers if you've ever felt like your grief wasn't just about the person, but about everything else that unraveled with them. This is why healing feels confusing. Because some days, you're not just crying for what happened. You're mourning who you were before it ever began. And the truth is, sometimes we don't realize what we've lost until we start trying to get ourselves back. In the next part, we'll reach the turning point. The moment when grief hits like an ambush, even when you think you're fine. Stay close. This is where things shift. Her name was Alina. 3 years out of the narcissistic relationship. She had a new job, new apartment, new friends. Life was good. Until one Thursday afternoon, in a grocery store aisle. She heard a song. Their song. She froze. And in less than 5 seconds, it all came rushing back. The night she cried on the bathroom floor. The look in their eyes when they said, "No one else would love you." The way she used to shrink, just to be enough. Alina had therapy. She read books. She journaled. She thought she was done grieving. But grief doesn't send a calendar invite. It just shows up. Uninvited. Unannounced. And somehow, still so familiar. This is what makes narcissistic abuse grief so cruel. It's not always loud. Sometimes, it sneaks in through the cracks of a perfectly good day. Have you ever felt like you were totally fine? Until something tiny shattered your breath? Drop a dove if it's happened to you. These are the trauma triggers no one sees coming. A voice. A smell. A sentence that sounds too familiar. And your brain, still wired for survival, pulls the emergency brake. It remembers. Even if your heart has tried to forget. So if today was one of those days for you, you're not back to square one. You're just feeling something that hasn't fully left yet. Healing isn't linear. It's layered. It's cyclical. And some days, it ambushes. In the next part, we'll explore what happens when you expect grief to go away. And it doesn't. And why that doesn't mean you're broken. Stay with me. We're not done yet. You've read every article. You've listened to every podcast. You know what narcissistic abuse is. You know their patterns. You know they won't change. But then, they say something cruel. Or you see them pretending like nothing ever happened. And the ache still finds you. You thought radical acceptance meant you'd stop hurting. But that's the myth. Radical acceptance doesn't erase pain. It just removes the surprise. You're no longer shocked. But you're still human. When someone treats you with contempt. When they deny your reality. When they rewrite history in front of your face. Yes, you might not be confused anymore. But it still hurts. Because grief isn't just about being fooled. It's about remembering how hard you tried to love someone who never showed up for you. And when you finally stop expecting different, the grief doesn't leave. It just shifts. It becomes quieter. Deeper. Sometimes even lonelier. Comment still human if you've ever felt the sting of knowing exactly who they are. And still feeling the pain when they prove it again. You're not weak for hurting. You're not broken because the grief returned. You're not behind in your healing. You're just alive. With a heart that wanted love. And a memory that still mourns the love you never received. In the next part, we'll talk about the seasonal loop. Why grief in narcissistic relationships often returns during holidays, milestones, and random days that aren't so random at all. Stay close. This is about to get personal. It's just a date on the calendar. But your chest feels heavy. You don't know why, until you check. It's the anniversary of the breakup. The last text. The last time you saw them. These dates are like hidden triggers. You don't plan for them. But your body remembers. Grief in narcissistic relationships doesn't work on logic. It's tied to smells, seasons, old songs, the taste of a dish you shared. You're scrolling through your phone and boom, one photo from 3 years ago. And suddenly you're back there. A survivor once told me. I was doing so well. Then Thanksgiving came. I didn't even like the holidays when I was with him. But suddenly, I couldn't breathe. That's the seasonal grief loop. Your brain holds emotional timestamps. It remembers what you endured, what you wished for, what you lost. Comment anniversary grief if a holiday or special date has ever brought back pain you thought had passed. And it's not just holidays. It's weddings you're invited to. Birthdays where their absence feels louder than their presence ever was. Random Tuesdays that mirror the day everything ended. It sneaks in like cold air through a window you thought was closed. And here's the truth. Grief without closure doesn't care if it's been 1 year or 10. Time doesn't heal it all. But recognition helps. Gentleness helps. When the date hits hard, don't ask, why am I still feeling this? Ask, what do I need to feel safe today? In the next segment, we'll talk about why this grief often isolates us. And how to stay connected even when we feel we don't belong. You're not broken. You're just remembering. Stay with me. Everyone around you seems fine. They laugh. They gather. They post holiday selfies with captions like, grateful for this perfect life. And you? You're just trying to breathe. This is the grief in narcissistic relationships no one talks about. The grief that isolates. The grief that tells you, you're the only one still hurting. Because when you look around, your friends didn't grow up like you. They weren't manipulated by someone who should have loved them. They weren't taught that love means proving your worth. So you feel distant. Disconnected. Like everyone else got a manual for life. Except you. I sat in a baby shower last week, one woman told me. And all I could think was, how do they laugh like that? How do they trust so easily? I don't belong here. That's trauma comparison. And it hurts. Because it's not just grief for what happened. It's grief for the life you didn't get to have. Comment seen if you've ever looked around a room full of people and still felt like the only one missing something. But here's the truth, love. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're not less whole because your healing looks different. This pain isn't weakness. It's evidence that you survived something no one else had to. And maybe the world won't understand your grief. But that doesn't mean your grief is invalid. In the next part, we'll talk about something powerful. What if we stop trying to cure this grief and learn to walk with it instead? You're not the only one still hurting. You're just the one who's brave enough to feel it. Stay with me. You've probably heard it before, time heals all wounds. But no one tells you what to do when it doesn't. When years pass, and the ache stays. That's the thing about grief in narcissistic relationships. It rarely ends with a clean break. There's no closure. No resolution. Just space, and silence, and memories that echo louder than they should. But maybe healing was never about getting over it. Maybe healing means learning to walk with grief without letting it define your every step. Like carrying a stone in your pocket. It's heavy, but not unbearable. And some days, you even forget it's there. Other days, it presses hard against your chest. But you keep walking. You keep breathing. Comment Carrie if you're learning to hold your grief without letting it hold you. So how do we do that? How do we live with the ache? We stop running. We slow down. We name it, gently. This is grief. And I see it. Here's a practice, when the pain returns, whisper to yourself. Of course it hurts. I loved hard. I hoped big. And I survived. That sentence changes everything. Because it turns shame into strength. Loneliness into understanding. And pain into presence. You don't need to be over it. You don't need to be unshakable. You just need to stay with yourself. Especially on the days the grief walks closest. Because the goal was never to forget. It was to remember, with less fear, and more love. In the next segment, we'll return to where it all began. Closure. And why you might never get it from them. But you can give it to yourself. Stay with me. They never said sorry. They never admitted what they did. They probably never will. So what now? Do you wait? Do you keep your healing on pause? Until someone else decides you deserve peace? That's what many survivors do. They hold out for the apology. That one perfect moment where the narcissistic person finally wakes up, sees the damage, and says, "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that." But what if that moment never comes? What if they don't feel remorse? What if they believe their own story so deeply that they can't see yours? That's when the work begins. Not with them. With you. Because closure without apology is still possible. It begins the moment you decide. I no longer need validation from the person who hurt me to know I was hurt. Comment my closure if you've stopped waiting for them and started healing for yourself. One survivor wrote, "I realized I was chasing closure like it was a key to my freedom. But the door was never locked." And it's true. You can choose your ending. You can say, "That was real. That was painful. But it will not be the story that owns me." You don't need their regret. You don't need their words. You need your own hand reaching back to your past self and whispering, "I believe you. I'm here now." In the final segment, we'll bring it all together and talk about what it means to grieve honestly, heal imperfectly, and love yourself through all of it. Stay close. This is where it lands. Maybe healing was never meant to be loud. Maybe it's just you waking up today, feeling a little less heavy than yesterday. This kind of grief, the grief in narcissistic relationships, doesn't have an expiry date. It doesn't follow the 5 stages. It doesn't fit into neat lines or moving on timelines. It's quieter, deeper, sometimes invisible to everyone except you. But it's also real. And just because others can't see it, doesn't mean it's not there. Maybe grief doesn't need to go away. Maybe it just needs to be honored, felt, held, without shame. If you've made it this far, you're doing the work most people run from. Not everyone can sit with this kind of grief. But you did. And that is love. Not just for them, but for you. You've grieved truthfully. You've hurt with clarity. And now, you can start loving without apology. That love might look different. Quieter. More careful. But it's yours. It's sacred. And it doesn't need permission. So let this be your soft landing. You don't need to fix the past. You just need to be here. With you. You don't have to decode them. You only need to trust your own clarity. Unmasking personality. If this story stayed with you, comment clarity so you remember. You don't need closure to be complete. And when the grief returns, because someday it might, you'll know how to meet it. Gently. Without panic. Without shame. Just presence. Thank you for walking this with me. You were never alone. You were always healing.